has been a while since I have been here on a vlog, probably about 6 weeks or 7 weeks or something since I last posted, because I've been away in Europe for 3 weeks and it was just wonderful and I had an amazing adventure. So today I thought it would be fun to just catch you up on all the different places I went to, all the amazing things that I saw, and all the brilliant things that I did that relate to my creative research as well for my master's. So it was a bit of a multi-level trip in that regard. It was planned, I think I let you know in a previous vlog that I recently had my DNA tested and figured out where my heritage is, which is 100% not from Australia. I have no Indigenous DNA, so 100% of my DNA is from the Northern Hemisphere. So we went to places, this is we as my husband and I, we went to places where I have ancestry, even in really small percentage, and it was a really great experience. It was a really super fun way to frame up a trip in the first place. I think sometimes it's really good to kind of have a guiding theme for a trip that you do overseas. So this was a really cool way to do it because I really wanted to see if there were many connection points or resonances with those places overseas, and in particular places where I have known ancestors from. So I just want to mention someone is belting out a tune on the piano next door in the rehearsal studio. So if you can hear any piano and I haven't been able to successfully block it out, that's what's going on. We live with it, we deal with it. Okay, so I'll let you know where I went on this trip. I have some notes here in my diary that I have recorded the trip in. Where is that? So I have a couple of different ways I recorded this trip, which I might show you first. I am a bullet journaler and normally I use this, I think it's A6 journal as my bullet journal, which is sort of my catch-all for everything, my diary, the whole thing. But I did a mini one for the trip. So I've actually got a really good record just in bullet form of all the places I went in this trip, which I'll use to guide me through just talking through where I went and what I did. I'll also show you this giant tome. This is my trip journal, so it's pretty thick. It's just a moleskin kahia. I use these pretty much for all of my notes and also studio sketchbooks at uni. So I have a bit of a library of these. So this is how fat this one got. And I sort of started off before the trip going through and doing research of places where I wanted to go and sort of created sections. I don't know if you can see these little tabs here, sections for each of the places we went to, and went in with a pretty clear idea of where I wanted to go because I was traveling with my husband. We did go without the kids. It was our celebration of both of us turning 50 this year. So that was really special to do together. But I was also really aware I'm traveling with him. He's not as big of an art nut as I am, although he's very tolerant of me going to a lot of museums and galleries. But yeah, I needed to make sure that I knew the places that were not negotiables that I really wanted to go to because we were limited in terms of his interest level, but also the amount of time we had in each place. So I have in this journal kept all of my planning notes and then also just like stuck in, took a little roll of sticky tape and I've just stuck in things that I've picked up along the way, ticket stubs for museums. You know, I've made notes in the margins about my experiences in each place, what I saw there. You know, it was really fun to keep this, and I kind of would fill it out when we were on trains, etc., because we did a lot of travel on U-Rail while we were over there. We started off, my husband actually went earlier. He went to Budapest, he had a conference, and I met him in Vienna. So we started off in Vienna, which was absolutely beautiful. I flew in to Vienna and arrived at around lunchtime, which was on a long haul flight from Australia. So it's actually 2 flights. It's one that's about 6 or 7 or 8 hours. I can't remember how much that one was going over to Dubai, and then a very short layover in Dubai, and then a second flight that was something like 13 hours to Vienna. So it's a really long trip from Australia to go to Europe. But I used an app called Time Shifter, which helps you figure out how to transition yourself in terms of when to sleep in the lead up to your trip and during the trip, and then when you arrive, and also tells you when to limit caffeine and when to drink caffeine and when to try and sleep. So it was super helpful. And I actually did sleep on the flights, both of them, and arrived and was ready and raring to go, which was brilliant. So the first place that we went to was a big walk and just walked around the Belvedere Palace area, which was beautiful. And then I really wanted to go to the Secession Museum, or the Secession Building, which was a purpose-built building for the Secession, which was a group of artists who started kind of an alternative movement just around the 1890s. In Vienna, and Gustav Klimt, who many of you are probably familiar with, was one of the artists involved in the Secession. And they built this, they had a huge successful first exhibition, and then off the back of that built their own purpose-built museum, which is sort of regarded as one of the very first white gallery cube spaces. And it has a beautiful frieze in there called the Beethoven frieze that Klimt painted, which was amazing to see. But the whole building itself is really beautiful and a bit of a work of art. So I really enjoyed going to that. I had a few big periods in my life actually where I've done deep dives on Gustav Klimt. I absolutely love his work. And so focusing in on his work and the Secession movement and all the other artists that were involved in that movement was a really big focus for me in Vienna. So we started off with the Secession Building. That was the first museum I went to, which was absolutely wonderful, and a big walk. And then the following day, we went to the Belvedere Palace and Gallery, which has one of the largest collections of Gustav Klimt's work, and really, really famous ones too, like The Kiss, Judith and Holofernes, and also quite a few of his landscape paintings. And they were the ones that I was particularly interested in seeing, because I find his landscapes really unique and quite different to a lot of other art that was happening at that time, such as the Impressionists in France and various other artists. So I was really interested to see those and just get up personal with the paintings, because you can always tell an artist in an art gallery, can't you? Because they're the ones that are just trying to get close to see how the artist has made the marks on the painting, you know, what the actual texture's like, how they've achieved different effects. So I really went to town at the Belvedere and loved looking at all of those works. It was also really great to see the construction of an artwork like The Kiss and Judith and Holofernes as well, because they are really textural, interesting works, and to see how he constructed those was just brilliant. So that was wonderful. We then also went to the National Library of Vienna, which was absolutely stunning. We went to a few different historical libraries on our trip, and this bar none was actually the most beautiful of all of them that we saw. And I think part of why it was such a great experience was because you could actually walk through it and photograph it. A lot of the others you couldn't enter the library, but this one you could go into. So if you're going to Vienna, I highly recommend going to the National Library of Vienna. It was really, really worthwhile. In the afternoon of that day, we also went and visited the Leopold Museum. The Leopold Museum is in a group of galleries, which is called the Museum's Quartier in Vienna. And honestly, I could have stayed another week in Vienna because there were so many museums there that I wanted to go to. And this Museum's Quartier area was fantastic. But we had really limited time. And this was our only day, full day there. So I only really had a day and a half, which was not enough, but it was still an opportunity to connect with the place. So I had to choose one museum, and we chose the Leopold because that gallery has a fantastic permanent exhibition, which is Vienna 1900, which gives you a really great overview of Vienna at that time, the secession movement, who all the key players were. It had works by Egon Schiele. I had really not seen a lot of Schiele's work. And I understand he was not a very nice person, and I actually don't like to give too much airtime to artists who were jerks. But I'm really glad that I saw his work in person because I understand why it's so well regarded. There was also works by Kokoschka, which were really interesting. I think both of those, they're some of the biggest collections in the world of their works, alongside having a significant amount of Klimt, of Klimt's partner, who was, I cannot bring her name to mind right now, but I will write it here. So I can tell you, because I have read books about her as well and her relationship with Klimt, and they were quite the avant-garde couple. And she was a fashion designer, and she produced this clothing that was, rejected corsets and was very futuristic for its time. And she was very influential in, Klimt choosing to wear a monk's smock when he painted. Anyway, if you ever get a chance to check her out, I highly recommend it because she's a really interesting person. I had quite a bit of her fashion, photographs of her fashion, and even like her traveling case that she had, all her cosmetics that she traveled with as well. So that was brilliant to see. And also in this museum was a reconstruction of Klimt's studio. And a lot of the furniture was created by a designer who was very influential in this period, produced a lot of different furniture design, graphic design, industrial design. Again, can't bring the name to mind right now, but I will write it below here so you can know who I'm talking about. But that exhibition really gave me context for understanding the secession movement. So if you are interested in Klimt and that whole period of the secession in Vienna, highly recommend this exhibition at the Leopold. Okay, so I started day 2 with a visit to the Paper Republic, which is a stationery store. I went to a few different specialist stationery stores that have objects that I have desired from afar, that I've seen on social media, etc. And Paper Republic was one of them. Paper Republic make these beautiful leather journals. So they're actually for holding other booklets like Kahir's, although they have their own range that they make. I've actually made quite a few little leather folders myself because I had the leather there and they're actually quite simple to make. But I really wanted to get one of these for my bullet journal for next year, the cover that has all the different inserts. And I've also customized it with a couple of little charms, which I got in Prague. So yeah, so that will be my bullet journal for next year. So that was a really fun little trip to do. And then we finished off that day in Vienna with a fantastic meal at the Café Central in Vienna, which was a bit of a thing to get into. There was a bit of a queue, but it's one of the very famous old cafes frequented by a lot of different creatives and people like Freud and a whole bunch of people. And it was fantastic. It was actually a really beautiful, great meal. The service was amazing and it just had an amazing ambience because there was a pianist playing throughout the meal and we really, really enjoyed that. Okay, so moving on, we had a very eventful journey to Prague the next day, almost missing our train, but we made it. Now, I should drop in here, on the cover of my journal here, I have a map, it actually shows the places that are coloured, show where I have some of my heritage from. So I have not a huge amount, but a reasonable enough amount of German heritage. I also have a little bit of Czech Republic DNA as well. So going to Prague was a way of connecting with that. The other thing I discovered when I had my DNA done is that I am a little bit Ashkenazi Jewish. So there's this whole Eastern European Jewish element to my heritage that I wanted to explore a bit more. This was a really big surprise to me when it came up in my DNA, because there was never any suggestion that there was any Jewish heritage in my family. So I really wanted to explore a little bit of that while I was in Prague. So once we arrived, we went for a big old walk around the old town. We went to the old Jewish quarter, which is part of the old town. Prague is absolutely gorgeous. Every single corner you turn around has some incredible view. It's so quaint and beautiful. I highly, highly recommend visiting if you've never been to Prague. It's one of those super charming towns that is now very high on my list of favourite European cities. So we went and explored the old Jewish quarter, and we visited the Pinkas Synagogue, which is a memorial to the Jews that were killed during the Holocaust, which was really, really moving to see. Yeah, I'm really glad I went there, because I strongly suspect that possibly the reason that there's been no knowledge or talk of there being Jewish heritage in my family is that someone probably came out here after World War II and didn't breathe a word of being Jewish because that was dangerous. I have no grounds for that idea, but I can totally see how that could have happened. So we went to the Pinkas Synagogue, and I felt like that was a really special thing to do, just to acknowledge anything that my ancestors might have been through in that period. And we also went to the Old New Synagogue, which is such a weird name, the Old New Synagogue. It's a very, very old synagogue, but it was new at the time it was built, which is how it got its name. And also the Old Jewish Cemetery, which is probably maybe familiar to you. It's very famous. It's got, tombstones that are just all stacked on top of each other. And is intermixed with all of these old Jewish buildings, and is really a very beautiful, moving place. So it was really great to connect with that part of my heritage. We also have had to pop by the famous astronomical clock in Prague, which is so fabulous. It's this old clock that has all these different astronomical elements to it. So go look that up if you're interested in that kind of thing. The next day we went to Prague Castle, which is sort of, you can't go to Prague and not go to Prague Castle and see the history of that city and how that citadel is so central to its history. So that was great. We went to an exhibition there that was about the history of the castle, and actually just taught me so much about the history of that place, as over the last couple of thousand years. One of our favourite spots was in Prague Castle. There was like a street of houses. Some of them were decked out with the objects that belonged to the people who lived there, but they were all from different periods of time. So one of them was an artisan shop, which is where I got these beautiful handmade charms. I'll show you these up close because they're really so special. So you can see one of them is a pair of glasses, which actually have glass in them, and the other is a book. And these were actually a leather bookmark, but I customized them to go on my journal, and I bought a couple for my daughters as well. But also in this street was a house that the surrealist author Franz Kafka, who's probably the most famous person that ever came from Prague, and he was Jewish as well. He used to go to one of these houses to write because he wanted to have somewhere quiet to work. So his house was there, and just numerous others. And I absolutely loved that street. It was one of my favourite places at the castle. We also went to the Franz Kafka Museum, which was really, really interesting. It must be really challenging to make a museum about authors because they, unlike artists, are not making necessarily work that is designed to be visual. We also visited the Mucha Museum. Mucha was a very famous Art Deco graphic designer. He hit his big fame in Paris when he made posters for Sarah Bernhardt. And that's how he made his name and his fortune and became quite famous. But he then progressed on to be quite a serious fine artist. So it was really great to go to his museum in Prague. The weird thing you should know is if you're going to Prague to the Mucha Museum, there is an official museum which is brand new that was opened this year, which is the one that's backed by the family and has most of the most authentic works. And then there's an unofficial one which has been around a lot longer, which looks really legit, which apparently is not the official one. So you should just be aware of that and in making your choice. I only went to the official one. I didn't go to the unofficial one, so I can't comment on if one's better than the other. But if you're going, just look it up and see which is right for you. We tried to go to the Clementium Library in Prague as well, which is another beautiful old library, but there was a huge line and we couldn't get tickets. So we actually decided to catch the tram to the Strahov Monastery instead, which also had a really beautiful library and a cabinet of curiosities, which was so interesting to see. If you're not familiar with cabinets of curiosities, they were really popular during the 15th, 16th century, moving into the Enlightenment, when science was a new burgeoning thing and discoveries were being made. And they're sort of the forerunner to what our modern museums are. So it was really interesting to see one. So that was really great. And then the next day we caught the train to Berlin. So in Berlin, my husband was running the Berlin Marathon, so that was a big focus for him. So we spent quite a bit of time getting him registered. The extravaganza is the Berlin Marathon. I think 55,000 people were running in the marathon, so it was quite the event for him. So he spent quite a bit of the time there just preparing for that and recovering. And I spent quite a lot of time doing solo explorations of museums, which neither of us minded at all. So I found some great spots in Berlin that were of interest in terms of art. Went to quite a few different spots, like the Brandenburg Gate, the Holocaust Memorial. Also, we went to the Checkpoint Charlie Museum, which is all about the communist era of East and West Berlin and how that all worked during the Cold War, which was really interesting. But in terms of art, I had a wonderful time at the Berlinische Gallery, and there is a permanent exhibition there called Kunst in Berlin, 1880 to 1980, which is art in Berlin, of course. And yeah, that was really fascinating. Particularly, there was quite a decent focus on women artists of that time, particularly surrealist and Dada artists that I didn't know a lot about, but really enjoyed learning about in this exhibition. So that's a great gallery if you're going to Berlin. And I also then went to the Jewish Museum in Berlin, which again I found a surprise, amazing exhibition on. They of course have an extensive exhibition which focuses on different elements of Judaism in Berlin and also some of the huge challenges that the community there have been through, particularly through the Holocaust and what happened. But at the time I was there was this fantastic exhibition on, which was called Jewish Women and Design in the Modern Era. So this was in the period before and also after World War II, and it really charted the impact that the Holocaust had on those Jewish women artists, those of them that survived, which were very few, most of whom did not survive. There was quite a few that were involved in the Bauhaus, some of whom got out a bit earlier, people like Annie Albers, who of course is an amazing textile artist. So that was absolutely brilliant, and I really loved that exhibition. And I didn't know it was on, I just went to the museum and discovered it. And I feel like there were so many fortuitous moments like that where I stumbled across a brilliant exhibition that really fed into my interest area at that time and was just a wonderful experience to see. The next day I went to the Alte National Gallery. I'm sorry, I'm butchering my German. but it's basically the National Gallery for work up to about 1900. So it was really great to see works by people like Caspar David Friedrich, who's like one of those fathers of Romanticism in painting. And there's quite a strong romantic element that I am exploring in my master's. So that was really brilliant to see his work because it was so influential and really beautiful to see. There was also works there by Paula Modersohn-Becker, who was a modern artist in Berlin, and she'd spent a lot of time in France. She actually died quite young, not long after the birth of her first child. But if you know anything about feminist art history, she was a pretty significant person doing pretty groundbreaking things at the time. There was also a brilliant exhibition on Camille Claudel. It was Camille Claudel and another male artist whose name I can't recall. And actually, I don't think I'll put it below because this man actually signed up to the Nazi Party and was part of that regime, even though they ended up rejecting him, which is kind of sad, but I don't really want to give airtime to people like that on my channel. So exploring Camille Claudel, who was a French sculptor who was the lover of Rodin, but also a collaborator with him and was an incredible artist in her own right. It was so great to see so many of her works. I've been wanting to see an exhibition of her work for a really long time, so that was brilliant to see. She had a really sad end to her life. She was institutionalized for the last, I don't know, decade and a half or something of her life, which is really sad because she was quite an extraordinary woman. So that was great to see as well. I went and cheered Mark on at the end of his marathon after that. And yeah, that was pretty much the end of Berlin. We then caught the train the next day to Amsterdam. I loved Amsterdam so much. And I think a lot of it, apart from the immense beauty of the place, like it is just so, it's like Prague in the sense that everywhere you walk, every corner you turn is absolutely beautiful. Well, that's in the old centre. The great part about the way we travelled was we did everything on public transport mostly. And so we did go and see some of the parts that like regular people live in that aren't millionaires, and there are definitely spots that aren't as picturesque. But I adored Amsterdam. And one of the reasons I think I adored it so much is the people there are just so lovely. They were so kind and genuinely happy and interested. So I booked tickets to the Van Gogh Museum before we left because they book out way in advance, and I knew that. So I made sure I had tickets because I love Van Gogh's work, and I don't think his work can be really understood unless you're looking at it because it's such a three-dimensional experience. The paint that he applied was so impasto that it's just out of this world. And I've seen decent bodies of work of his before. There's a very good collection of his work at the Musée d'Orsay in Paris. But the biggest collection, of course, is at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. So that was the first place we went to, and it was great. I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed seeing the unfolding of his work over the different periods, and also really interesting little bits. Like there was this one spot where there was a chest, a box, a wooden box, and it was full of wool, coloured wool, little balls of it. And apparently it was Van Gogh's, and he used to use the pieces of wool to put them together as like a way of colour swatching his paints so that he wouldn't waste paint. So he'd lay the different threads out to get his colour combinations right. And I just thought, that's so clever. And also when you look at the nature of the lines in his work, they almost look like threads, the way that you can see the line that was made by his brush. So it was just seeing little things like that that I really loved, alongside seeing, of course, the artwork. I learned a lot from looking at Van Gogh's paintings, particularly his paintings of trees and of nature. And as someone that's exploring landscape painting at the moment, it was really great to see that work and also see how it evolved from his earlier time into the latter part of his life, close to when he died, and when he just really you know, the virtuosity of his work at that stage when he really knew what he was doing. So that was wonderful. The other thing we did in Amsterdam was get the iAmsterdam card, which I highly recommend if you're travelling to Amsterdam, because you get all your tram travel included, loads of museum entries included, which we went to a lot, and they would have cost a lot more than what we spent on this card. They were all really good museums that were listed on it. You also got 24-hour bike travel if you wanted to rent a bike, and you also could go on a canal cruise. So it was a really worthwhile thing to get that I highly recommend. In Amsterdam, we also went to the Rembrandt Museum, which was brilliant. This was the house and home that he lived in and also had several studios in. Absolutely loved it. They really went deep with their exhibitions inside the studios on how, you know, historical pigments he used, tools he used. I actually bought a couple of reed pens from the store downstairs. They had his print studio there with a demonstration of how he did his etchings. It was really, really good, and I highly recommend visiting it. It's also just that whole thing of being at home of that period, and how an artist like him worked from home and had studio spaces and how that interacted with the living spaces. It was a really good museum. We also went to the Rijksmuseum. Forgive me again if I'm pronouncing that incorrectly, because I have no Dutch. But this is where you will see Rembrandt's works, including really famous ones like the Night Watch. That was actually being restored while we were there, and instead of taking it away so that no one could see it, they actually had set up the space where it was being displayed with the restorers working in there on this work. So that was really fascinating to see. But the other highlights were seeing, of course, Vermeer's work, beautiful, exquisite Vermeer's works, which they're not very big, so it was so good to get up close and personal to those. And also a couple of women artists, which you may not be familiar with, but because I'm a botanical artist and I've been researching the history of that, I was very familiar with and very excited to see. Rachel Reich, who was one of the most famous artists of the 17th century, she painted the most exquisite floral still lifes. And Dutch still lifes, they're so famous for their detail, their inclusiveness of incredible, interesting symbology in terms of what's included and the deeper meaning of them. So they were great to see. And then also the works of Judith Lysa, another female artist of that period who was incredible and sort of was recently rediscovered. So they were fantastic to see. The gardens at the Rijksmuseum are also incredibly beautiful, so make sure you go outside and have a little stroll there. I really loved it there. We went and grabbed burgers at a little street stand and brought them back and ate them there because it was so lovely. We also went to the Moko Museum, which is a contemporary art museum, and it has works by people like Banksy, Basquiat, Hirst, Warhol, Kasama, Emin, Murakami. It was actually really brilliant. The whole lower level was full of installation rooms, which were really brilliant. And then there were rooms upstairs that were dedicated to different artists. And it was a really great museum, really, really fun. I think it was one of my husband's favourite ones to see. If you had kids, I reckon they'd find it pretty interesting too. So highly recommend the Moko Museum. And then we also went to the Art and Design Museum, and excuse me again while I butcher the name. I'll write it down below. The Stedjiog. I'm going to write it below because I cannot pronounce this word, and I really need to learn a little bit of Dutch since I'm a little bit Dutch. And we just really popped in here. The great thing about the foyer of this place was there were two huge Helen Frankenthaler paintings. She was an abstract expressionist from New York in the 1960s and 70s, and I'd never seen any of her work in person before, so that was great to see those. And then it was a design museum, so there's a lot of interesting stuff in there around the Bauhaus movement and Russian constructivism and lots of different furniture design. It was really, really good. If you're a design person, I highly recommend this museum. And then we went on a beautiful river cruise, which was, I mean, it has to be done. We had a great guide who talked us through the history of how Amsterdam was built, and it was just cruising through all of the canals. So it was lovely just to sit down and relax for an hour and do that. Another great place we visited was the Houseboat Museum, which kind of you can go and learn about all the houseboats that people live on in Amsterdam. So that was fun. We did rent bikes very briefly in Amsterdam, but I fell off, so we returned them very promptly. And I did hurt myself a little bit, not seriously, but it did make the trip a bit challenging from then on, because we popped into the Tulip Museum, which, to be honest, was a bit average. But yeah, absolutely loved Amsterdam. I'm definitely going back. The next day we flew to Edinburgh, which the biggest portion of my DNA is from Scotland. So this was the part of the trip that I knew I was going to be doing some really deep inquiry, because I have known ancestors in those places. I don't have any known ancestors from any of these other places, but Scotland was very central to my research in terms of how it relates to what I'm doing for my master's. So we flew to Edinburgh from Amsterdam, which took like an hour. They're so close to each other. And again, did a lot of walking in Old Town Edinburgh, because it's a gorgeous, gorgeous place. It's just so unique, and the way that all the buildings are built from stone. And we were there in autumn, so it was a very moody, atmospheric kind of place to be. So we did, lots of walks around some of the big memorials, such as the Sir Walter Scott Memorial. Popped into some booksellers that I wanted to go to, such as Toppings and John Kay. Blackwell's, which I think is the oldest bookstore in Edinburgh. We went to the Surgeons Museum in Edinburgh, which was really fascinating, and my husband really, really enjoyed that. The thing that I've never done a lot of research on, that I really, now that I'm back, I intend to look into this much more, is the Scottish Enlightenment. Scotland and Edinburgh in particular were real hotbeds of intellectuals who did incredible things, people that invented things. The way that medicine was progressed through surgery in Edinburgh was really significant. There were very influential authors that came through from that place, such as Sir Walter Scott. We went to the Writers' Museum, which is dedicated to Sir Walter Scott, Burns and Stevenson, Robert Louis Stevenson. And I absolutely love that. It's in a great old building. And a lot of the museums in Edinburgh are free. A lot of museums in the UK are free. So that was fabulous. We also popped into the museum in Edinburgh. Yeah, again, we didn't have a lot of time. We walked several places. We did book tickets to Edinburgh Castle, because you can't go to a city like that without going to the castle, which was really interesting to see. Although I have to say, castles always leave me a bit cold, but we always find something interesting there. So it was good to see. But the big part of the trip for me was wanting to connect with my Scottish ancestry there. So we rented a car in Edinburgh and drove to a place called Kirkliston, which is just outside of Edinburgh, a village, where quite a few of my Brock ancestors are buried. So yeah, the experience of being in the churchyard was kind of weird. Like, I didn't know how I was meant to feel about that. There were a few graves that belonged to my ancestors, one of which was actually on the exterior of the church wall right out the front. So he was clearly a really important member of that community. So that was pretty meaningful. And I spent some time, I really wanted to make a record of my experience there. And I'd thought about this a lot when I was traveling, before I started traveling, about how I was going to collect visual information of this experience, because I can't collect botanical samples or any of the usual things that I would do, because you can't bring anything like that back into Australia. There's really strict rules. So I decided to make rubbings of the gravestones, and I took over a few Caran d'Ache wax pastels, a few Conte crayons, and a few different types of paper. And I made rubbings of the gravestones and some of the other stones that I encountered in Scotland. But as circumstances had it, when we rented our car, we actually had a whole thing happen that ate up about 3 hours of our time, a very short period of time we had in that day to visit the kirkyard of my relatives. So I didn't have a long time there, and I think that impacted how I connected with the place, or perhaps wasn't able to quite spend enough time to really deeply connect in. But you know, maybe I wasn't going to feel connected with it anyway in any particular way, because a graveyard, I don't know that was a place where I expect I would feel really connected. Anyway, it's an experience that I had. The other result of the drama we had with renting the car was that I had to drive the car. It was an issue around Mark only had a digital license, and they only accept physical licenses and are very strict about it when you rent a car in the UK. So be aware of that. If you're going to the UK, don't rely on your Aussie digital license. So I had mine, so I had to do all the driving, which, you know, is always a bit hairy in a foreign country. So I didn't have long at the churchyard because I had to drive to the Highlands, and I didn't want to be driving on those windy, unfamiliar roads in the dark. So we didn't have, I don't think, enough time in the churchyard. Anyway, it is what it is. We drove up to the Highlands, and my God, the beauty. I wasn't prepared for how beautiful Scotland is. I know people say it, but photographs can't really convey the feeling of that place. And they also can't convey how huge the lochs actually are up there either. These huge bodies of water, and the drama of the landscape and the lushness of the forests and the trees. It was an absolutely gorgeous drive, we drove to a place called Fort Augustus, which is near Loch Ness, and stayed there and did a bit of exploring around there. And it was at one of these spots called Altnakrika, I hope I said that correctly, when we went for a walk in this beautiful woodland that was filled with waterfalls and beautiful Scotch pine trees and beautiful oak trees with moss going all up the sides. This is where I had my big connection point and spiritual connection with nature in Scotland. And at one point I put my hands on a tree, and I was just moved to actually hug the tree. And I had my cheek on the tree, and just off to the side was this waterfall that was running. And it was so incredibly beautiful and such an alive place that I actually just stood there and cried. I was really, really moved by it, and I really connected deeply with the trees and the landscape, and I got such a sense of my connection to that kind of forest that was so lush and green and moist and alive, and the trees and all of the foliage that was there and the running water. It was so beautiful. And I really look forward to the artwork I'm going to make out of that experience, because that was probably the deepest connection I had with any place on the whole trip. So that was really special. And then we spent the rest of the day just weaving our way back to Inverness. In the car, we stopped off at Prague Castle ruins, which was great to see. They're right on the loch and very dramatic and beautiful, quite a famous spot, I believe. So that was interesting to see. And then we went to Inverness and dropped off the hire car and caught the sleeper train, the Caledonian sleeper, to London. That was a great trip. That was the best train trip of the whole trip. And I slept really well on the train. It had a dining car. It was really cozy. The rocking of the train, I just kind of fell right asleep. It was such a tight space, but it was really well designed. So that was a really good experience. And then we were in London, which was the last stop of the whole trip. So London is not my favourite city in the world. I remember when I first went there when I was 21, it was not my favourite place. I went there after I'd been in Europe again, and I just found it really underwhelming and didn't find the people especially friendly. But I did have some really great experiences there. The most beautiful experience was I got to spend a day at the British Museum looking at the collages of 18th century artist Mary Delaney. Hey guys, apologies for the noise. I am at the British Museum right next to a road. I have an appointment today at the Prints and Drawing Study Room to view the collages made by Mary Delaney in the 18th century. It's something that I have done quite a bit of study on over the last couple of years and can't wait to see them in person. They're absolutely incredible botanical collages that she made and started making when she was 72, and there's nearly 1,000 of them, but I'll only be viewing a couple of boxes today, so let's get to it. I can't show you any of her artwork on here because they have very strict rules about that. So please go and look up Mary Delaney and see if you can look at her collages. They're all on the British Museum website digitally. But she is such an incredible woman. She was a noble woman. You know, she had an arranged marriage for the first part of her life, and then she actually got to marry for love again later in her life. She never had children, and she was part of the inner circle of sort of the royal court at that time. She chose to marry a vicar and live in Ireland for a long time. And when she was in her 70s, one day she was looking at a beautiful botanical specimen and she just decided she would make a collage of the specimen, which they're all like realistic, three-dimensional depictions of botanical specimens. But they're just mind-bogglingly detailed that she made out of paper, some of which she hand-painted. And they're absolutely extraordinary. And the story of this woman is so inspiring. So I really encourage you to research her. There's a great biography by Molly Peacock about Mary Delaney, which is one of the best biographies I've ever read. So I highly recommend that. That's still in print. And the staff at the museum were absolutely gorgeous. I had made arrangements and applied to see them a couple of months in advance because it was really important to me to see these works. And they were so helpful and enthusiastic, and I actually could only see a couple of boxes, so 20 works in total. And most of the works that I wanted to see happened to be in those 2 boxes, and I was really grateful that they arranged that for me. So that was the highlight of London for me. We also did a great tour of the Shakespeare Globe Theatre, which is a reconstruction of his, the original, which was really, really interesting to sort of get an idea of what Elizabethan London was like. So I really recommend that actually. We popped into the Tate and had a bit of a walk through the Tate because of course you have to go to the Tate. Yeah, I also went to a couple of beautiful art supply stores and stationery stores. I went and bought some gorgeous things and a new fountain pen at the lovely Choosing Keeping, which is a gorgeous stationery store in London. I think it's in Covent Garden. And also went to Cornelius and Son, which is a beautiful art supply store, which is very close to the British Museum, and bought some historical ink there, which I've never seen anywhere else, which was a lovely thing to get for some artworks I have planned. We also went to Kew Gardens because I planned to see the Marianne North Gallery, which has all of her botanical paintings that she created in there. And that was like something I was really looking forward to. We went there, we went and bought our tickets. The lady at the front counter was lovely. She's like, I used to be a guide in that gallery. You'll have a really lovely time. Yes, it's open today. And we went there and it was closed. And I, of course, being me, went and knocked on the window when I saw someone inside and said, look, I've travelled here from Australia. This is my last day in London and I've come here to see these works. They're actually part of research that I'm doing. Can I just have like a 5-minute look? And he said no. And I thought, you know, how hard is it when someone's come that far? Anyway, British bureaucracy, hey? So that was really disappointing, but it wasn't meant to be. And yeah, Kew Gardens was interesting to see and nice, but that kind of coloured my whole experience of the place, I'm afraid. And I probably didn't do as much there as I would have, because I was a bit upset after that and was like, I'm leaving. Anyway, And the other place that I went to that I really enjoyed was the Sir John Soane Museum, which is another house museum. He was an architect in the Regency period, and this was the home where he lived and worked. And there are several rooms in there that are on exhibition, and he left it to the British government to be a museum after he died. So that is really worth looking at. If you love the Regency period, if you're into Jane Austen and, you know, all things of that time, you need to go and see this museum. It's absolutely extraordinary. There's so many interesting bits and pieces in there. So yeah, that was really, really lovely to see. And that pretty much wraps up the trip. Don't know that I mentioned that I have reasonable amount of English heritage as well, so it was good to go to England. Of course, I didn't get to explore very extensively, but I set foot in each of the countries that figure in that DNA picture, and that was a really interesting thing to do. Of course, the place that I had the biggest connection with was Scotland. That moment that I had in nature was very, very special, and that for me will probably be the most significant experience. I definitely want to go back to the Highlands. I want to spend some time in Scottish forests because that place is special and I felt it in my bones. Like I've never had an experience quite as strong as that in nature and the way that I was moved by it. But each of them had connection points that were relevant to that heritage, and it was a really fun way to frame up a trip. Anyway, I'd better stop talking because I've been going, I don't even know how long I've been going for now, an hour. So this is either going to be a very long vlog or perhaps two. I don't know. I'll see how I go. Anyway, thank you for being here. This one was a little bit different to usual in terms of it's a bit of a sum up of my trip and a bit of a recommendations if you're traveling to those regions, kind of a chat. I will get back to some studio vlogs very soon, but until then, you take really great care of yourself.
I almost forgot to say, if you have stayed to the end of this possibly very long vlog, leave me an emoji, leave me an aeroplane emoji, since this was all about travel. And yeah, let me know if there's places that I've talked about here that you want to visit, or what some of your places are that you visited. And also, if you've gone somewhere that is connected with your heritage and had a really intense connection with place, I'd be really interested to hear about that. Thank you so much for being here. And yeah, if you haven't subscribed already and you're liking what you're seeing here, then make sure you would subscribe. And if you can give this video a thumbs up, that also really helps. I'll catch you next time. Bye.